Hey guys, it's Mike from Eldorado Guitars, and today I am coming to you with my Mark IIC Plus. This just came back from Mesa. It was just looked over by Mike B for a full recap, retube, general maintenance. There were a lot of pots that were out of spec. He cleaned the sliders and like re-greased them, a bunch of other things. This was recapped with Sprague and F&T caps that I ordered at Mike B's request. If you want to know more, put something in the comments and I'll tell you. I've not turned it on, so this is a first impressions video. I just want to give you like literally my first impressions. The settings that are on it are still the settings that Mike B had on it from the factory. So I haven't touched anything. Literally, I'm about to turn it on for the first time. So I just thought it'd be cool to make a video just kind of documenting it. And just trying to see if we can dial in a couple of tones, and I'll give you kind of my impressions of how it is now versus how it was before the recap. So right now, let's go ahead and turn it on. Mike B did not have the EQ in. He has the EQ out, which I think is interesting. So let's take a look. Oh, and by the way, I need to say what this is. So this is a Mark IIC Plus DRGX. So that stands for 100-watt simulclass graphic reverb, graphic EQ, reverb, and the export transformer. So this is a pretty rare 2C Plus, DRGX pretty rare. So let's check it out, and I'm gonna turn the standby on and let's see what Mike B had dial in. I'm using a Les Paul Custom 2021 dead stock, 498T, 490R, no mods, just a regular old Les Paul Custom. So let's check it out. Like an edge of breakup sort of tone. Let's go ahead and pop to the lead channel and we'll see what he had dialed in here. Let's check it out. It's lacking a little bit of volume compared to the other channel and a little bit of gain, so I'm going to turn up the lead master a bit to compensate for the volume first. Okay, so the volumes are about the same now. Let's check out the tone. I don't think it's a very typical 2C sound, but it sounds cool. He might have had some of these switches pulled out. So the 2C Pluses have a ton of switches. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pullouts. So of these 8 switches or 7 switches, dials, knobs, like 6 of them pull out. So he might have had some of these pulled out. Maybe he had the gain boost pulled out. Maybe that's why it sounds a little less gainy than I would have expected. So let's pull out the gain boost and see what happens. Very growly. I doubt that's probably how he was running it. Let's try the shift on the treble. That might make a difference. Maybe I'll try one more thing, which is to pull. Let's pull the treble shift and the bass shift. That will kind of simulate inputting in a graphic EQ a little bit because it's going to boost the highs and boost the lows. So like, let's check that out. We'll pull both and see what happens. Push both back in, and here is our bass sound again, and this time I'm going to put the graphic EQ in, so let's take a look. He might have just not had it dialed in for a very heavy sound, because I think this sounds like a really good just like crunch tone, you know, I mean just like, you know. Let's go ahead and click in the graphic EQ. He really doesn't have that much changed here. In fact, 3 of the 5 sliders are flat, so I'm not expecting a giant difference, but like, let's just check it out. Sound. It's not how I would normally like leave this amp, because I would probably set it for a more aggressive tone, but it is really cool. It's a cool, especially on the neck pickup, it does sound really cool. I mean, check that out. Like, it sounds kick-ass. It does sound really good. It sounds really good. I took a picture of these settings before I messed with everything, by the way. But I think it's cool to see Mike B's settings. I think it's very cool. Now let's set it up more like how I would typically run it, right? I just thought it'd be cool to go through that and just kind of see how he had it set. I think it's pretty cool. I guess one thing we could do really quickly before we alter it significantly is I could just increase the overall preamp volume and just see if we can get, like, maybe he just was using that as like a way to like go through different sounds. So like currently it's at 7. So like we can see if we up it to 8 or 9 if we get a little more crunch out of it. So let's check it out before we mess with it. Going to give us more brightness and more gain, but I was pretty surprised with that. You could see how the amp really filled out and picked up in aggression. I mean, again, this was 7, right? So this was 7, which was a cool sound, you know. All right, and then here it was again at 9. which is why I kind of want to, when you increase volume 1 on the Mark II too much, it starts to get flubby. So I'm going to pull the bright and let's see what that happens. I may lower the volume slightly from 9 to like 8 and pull it. Let's see what happens when I pull it though. We're going to get more gain, more brightness. Right now a little bit, like cool. I actually dig it. It's very cool. Okay, let's dial it in more the way that I would probably dial it in, and just check that out. So I'm going to put volume 1 in, and I'm going to leave the lead on, obviously. I'm probably actually going to bring the drive down a little bit, because it'll probably be a little too aggressive by the time I actually like dial this in. I'm going to put both at 7, the volume 1 and the lead drive at 7. And then check that out. I do want to give you, by the way, I almost forgot, I want to give you my initial impressions of the recap job and everything. I think the amp is much clearer now. That's probably the biggest thing that I've noticed, is it seems clearer to me now. I could tell the treble was a little bit more sharp and a little bit clearer. I don't know yet, but it feels like the amp might have a little bit more gain than it did before. That could just be the way Mike had it set up. I'm not sure. But it just, overall, the amp sounds clearer. It's a little less smeared together. And the bass feels more controllable to me right now than it felt before. Before, sometimes you struggled to control the amount of like big rumble bass on this amp. And it doesn't feel that way right now. So that's my initial impressions. All right, so let's go ahead and keep dialing this in. So first thing I'm probably going to do is just set up the graphic EQ the way I would normally set it, and most people probably will normally set it, which is the classic Mesa V curve, right? So Mike didn't really have much of that dialed in here. So I'm going to go ahead and just like, let's up the bass a little bit. I'll leave 240 the same. I'm going to pull 750 down a little bit. I'm going to put 220 at even, and I'm going to put 6600 up a little bit. So this is kind of the classic Mesa V curve. And let's just see, I'm not going to change any other settings. Let's just see what it sounds like, again, on the lead channel with these settings. Let's take a look. So it seems like probably more gain is needed. Definitely the amp is a little bit clearer this way. My sense is it would not cut as well because it feels a little scooped right now. So what I'm going to do first is let's kind of check out the gain situation. So I'm going to push volume 1 up to 8, and let's see, and I'll put the lead drive up to 8, and let's see what that does, if that gives us the gain we're looking for. it's missing that aggression that I think most people want out of the 2C Plus. So here's what I'm gonna do. First, I'm gonna increase the mids a bit. They're currently on 3. Mike had them on 3. I'm gonna increase them to 5. So let's do that first and see what that yields. And this is 5, and what this is doing is putting in more mid-range in the preamp, right? So let's check that out. It's a little bit big, it's a little bit fuzzy. Maybe what I will do is I'll pull out one of these brights. There are, I think, 3 bright options. There's one on this one, there's a shift on this one, and then there's a brightness on this one. I'm gonna pull the bright on the lead master, which is a little bit more subtle. The bright on this can be a little intense. So let's check out the lead master bright first. Here's our bass tone. That's a really good Adam Jones kind of type tone. That's a really good Tool tone, I think. A little mid, because the Tool tone is actually pretty mid-range heavy. I think the first thing everybody does when they try and do Tool tones is they try and turn the mids all the way down. I'm not sure why. Adam Jones's tone is actually pretty mid-rangey. If you look at his Diesel and his Marshall, like the mids are cranked, right? They're literally on like 8 or 9 or 10. And then the Adam Jones sound also does not have as much gain as you would think it has, right? Like it sounds really heavy in the mix, but his guitars really don't have that much gain. This sounds kind of like that to It sounds pretty good. Yeah, it really has that kind of Aenima tone. And this amp is so compressed. It's so fun to do those types of like pull-ons and pull-offs because they're all so easy. Like on a Marshall, like on an old Plexi or something, it's harder because they're not as compressed. But the Mesas are so compressed, you can do all the finger style stuff so easily, you know? Okay, so let's keep dialing in for like my tone, right? That's still a little mid-rangey for me. Maybe one thing we could do is we could suck down some mids in here. Another thing we could do is we could raise the treble and bass maybe here a little bit, like that's an option, but I think it's gonna get really flubby. The bass is still on 4, which is where Mike B had it set, which I would say is pretty high. I mean, like before the recap, I was running this at maybe like 1 or 2, you know, like tops. Sometimes I had it on 0. So definitely the amp has a much more controllable bass now since the recap and the repairs. It definitely, the bass is much more manageable. So I don't know if that's like a thing, Like in, you know what I mean? Like in the, is that known that if you recap your 2C plus, the bass will be more manageable? I don't know. But it definitely sounds good right now. Let's go ahead and suck some mids down. I'm going to bring this down just a little bit more. And let's see what happens now. That's very different. Listen to that. Wait, hold on. I'm going to put it back where it was. So it was like here. Of what people are thinking of when they think of Mesas, right? Definitely that's starting to get into like the sound. I don't think it would cut as well as that one, but it sounds much more wide, right? It has a much more wide sound. Sounds cool, yeah. Very, very cool. Very cool. Okay, let's keep going. What I may do is I may actually bring the bass down just a tiny bit, like to like 3.5 maybe. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually push that bright on the master back in for a second, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the amount of treble in the preamp here. I used to run this higher, around like 8 or 9. It's currently on 7. So here's the current sound with the lead master pushed back in. I left the graphic EQ where it was a moment ago, so it should still sound pretty wide. All right, now I'm going to up the treble. Is really good now, like very clear, almost a little bit cutting, but like I'm gonna see if I can work with it for a second here. I think the bass is a little weird though. It's a little anemic right now. It's very tight, right? It's very tight. I mean, listen to the tightness, like. Yeah, it's tight. It's really, really, really tight. I mean, these are just 10 gauge strings. So in drop D, this thing is already very wobbly, right? And you were just getting like. Sorry, I'm not much of a speed picker, but you get the point, right? Like Yeah, it's definitely very tight, but I do think this would be really good for like recording, but I do think here in the room it's like missing a little something. It's like some low mids or something that's missing. It's missing a little bit of that like punch to the chest, right? That you can really get out of a 2C plus. So let's see if we can fix that. Probably the most logical thing to do is up these sliders a little bit, but I'm gonna try something just slightly different to see. I'm gonna pull the bass. If you pull the bass on this, it'll shift the low range frequency, almost like a depth on a Friedman. You know what I mean? Like it's like almost like a depth switch. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Wow, the front of this amp is really hot. Holy shit. Like literally, I think if you left your finger on here, it would start to burn in about like 10 or 15 seconds. I don't know if that's normal. I assume it is since this just came back from Mike B, but the front is very hot. Very hot. Anyhow, all right, so let's hear our tone right now. All right, let's pull it. Okay, so it definitely has more bass, and it is punching you in the chest, but it's a little flubby. Listen. Yeah, probably the best thing to do is either leave it plugged, pushed in, which I just pushed it back in during the playing, push it back in and then lower these sliders, or, push it back in and raise these sliders, or pull it out and lower the sliders. One or the other. So let's try leaving it in and upping the sliders. So here's where we are right now. This reminds me more of like a Tool 10,000 Days tone or something. It's got a lot more low end push than like the Aenima tone, right? It sounds kind of similar to it. Lateralus, right? Like if I turn this down to like a insane. Yeah, that sounds really, really good. Holy shit. Yeah, that sounds awesome, dude. That sounds really, really, really awesome. Yeah, that's a very good Lateralus 10,000 days tone. That sounds like the Adam Jones 2000s tone. Yeah, it's insane. Wow, yeah, that sounds cool as shit. And definitely, okay, so I want to keep giving you my impressions about the amp now versus before. The bass is the biggest difference. The bass is by far the biggest difference. The bass and the clarity of the amp are both vastly improved. The bass is wildly easier to control. I mean, I have the bass right now on like 3.5, and I still have these sliders are very aggressively set. Like the 80 hertz is almost to the top. The 240 is a little bit up from flat, which I never used to run it with this steep of a V curve. I always had a V curve, but it was kind of more like, I would kind of go like this sometimes, you know, or I would just do like a soft V, or I would do like a V like this and then sharper treble. But I never had these sliders this high, especially not while running the bass control so high, right? I used to set this at like 1 or 2. And then I would set these sliders at like just a little bit raised from flat, right? So this is definitely, the bass is notably different, very, very different. The other big difference, I think, is the clarity of the amp. The entire amp is much clearer. I don't mean brighter necessarily, but it's clearer. The whole amp is much, much, much clearer. And then maybe a third difference is it does seem to have a little more gain. I mean, I've got this on 8 and this on 8, and I don't have anything like the brights pulled or anything which would add extra gain. And there's already, and really I'm not running these that high. The treble's at 8, the bass is at 3.5, and the mids are at 5, and it's got just plenty of gain. I mean, it's got a lot more gain, I think, than it used to. I think I used to run volume 1 at like 8 or 9, and then I used to run the lead drive at something like, yeah, like 9, and then I had like, I think I used to pull out this for brightness and stuff like that. And just the whole amp is just clearer, the bass is clearer, tighter, a little bit more gain, and the noise floor is very low. Listen, I'm gonna turn it up, listen. And the house here has very dirty power. In fact, some people have commented on my past videos that the amps are buzzing, right? Because the noise floor in here is very high. And listen to this. It's really not that bad. I mean, like, is there a little bit of buzz? Yes, but it's not bad. For the amount of gain we have going right now, this is not bad. The noise floor is much lower. Yeah, so anyway, those are my impressions. I'm gonna continue to dial in a little bit here. I know this is getting a little long, so we'll just go a little bit further. So if I wanted to do, let's try and do more of like a Jerry Cantrell kind of thing. So what we're probably gonna have to do is scoop the mids out a little bit more and play around with the mid-range a little bit. We might need to add a little bit more gain via a bright switch also. So let's check it out. that sounds killer. I might actually turn it up a little bit because we cut some mids, so we lost a little bit of volume. So I'm gonna turn it up just a hair. I don't want to piss off the neighbors too bad. Fuck, the neighbors are probably gonna be pissed because all that bass is going through the wall. Holy fuck. Yeah, it sounds awesome. Yeah, it sounds unreal. Like, I mean, that's a great sound, man. That is a great sound. How well it cleans up. I'm very interested in that, so I'm going to go on the neck pickup and let's turn it down and just see. Not too bad. This is a pretty dark neck pickup. Sounds awesome. Like, wow. Yeah, it sounds insane. Maybe just one more thing. I feel like I'm very close to like a naked Billy Howerdel kind of tone. I feel like I'm pretty close. Like, let me see. It's maybe a little bit bright. Maybe like I'll push this in. close. You know, I'll leave you with this thought. Somebody told me a long time ago, before I bought the Mark IIc Plus, about the Mark series, right? They said, like, the thing about the Mark series is every great amp, right, is in there somewhere. You just have to find it, right? Because there's so many, you know, knobs, options, pulls, the graphic EQ, there's presence in the back, right? It's like, there's so many different tones you can conjure out of this amp. It's absolutely incredible. I don't want to suggest that all of these amps could be replaced by that amp, but if you had a notepad and you wrote all your settings down, you could probably get pretty close to most of the amps in here, especially if you were to put like some compressors, or you were to like maybe adjust the negative feedback or something. You know, if you could do like a mod to get a knob or something on that, you could probably come really close to most of these amps. Yeah, so this sounds insane. Thanks for hanging out with me and just checking out this amp. Again, this is just first impressions, right? I mean, the recap and reservice, you know, Mike B did a killer job. I mean, it sounds incredible. Everybody always says that, you know, they're afraid to recap their amps because then it won't be all original, right? But if you listen to people who have done it, a lot of them will tell you that you should do it because the amp will absolutely sound better. And I have to agree, right? I was nervous to do it because I didn't want to screw with this amp. I mean, Mike B or maybe Dave Friedman are like the only people I probably would have let screw with this amp, right? And it's definitely an improvement, right? I mean, it's like, it's greatly improved. The amp sounded great before, but it sounds absolutely insane now. So if you are on the fence about having your amp recapped, retubed, blah, 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 do it, man, because it makes the amps, especially these old amps, right? I mean, if you have a new amp, you don't need to do anything, right? But if you have an old amp, like, you know, an old Marshall or, you know, whatever, get it recapped, you know? It's gonna sound a lot better if the caps are testing out of spec, you know, then you should definitely get it recapped. I think Mike said all the caps in this were out of spec. Like, I think he said almost all of them were out of spec. He said several of the knobs were out of spec. Several of the pots, right, were out of spec, because that just happens, right? Over the years, they get out of spec. So this is basically taking it back to where it was in 1983. And it's absolutely unreal that this amp existed in 1983. I mean, the amount of gain, the amount of options, I don't mean this in a nasty way to the other, but it's almost like all these other amps like don't even need to exist. It's like we solved it, right? We made the perfect hard rock and heavy metal amp in 1983, right? Like, it's almost like you don't even need to keep going, right? So totally awesome. Very, very cool. Thanks, Mike B. Thanks, Mesa. And please, guys, like, subscribe, share. It really does help me out and help the channel out. So thanks for hanging out. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.